This video and all other videos on this channel for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel and we're running a little late today because I actually slept in all the way until 9 o'clock, which is extremely rare for me to be able to get that kind of sleep. So feeling pretty good, but like I said, we are a little bit behind schedule. Today, I want to talk about MicroStrategy because I've been, for a while now, especially with the members, talking about one of two setups. And I've been saying the MicroStrategy trade should be one of the more easy to identify trade setups. So I'm going to show you that and a little bit of MicroStrategy news at the same time. I've also got some Altseason hopium for you. And then I want to spend the rest of today's episode going through the Bitcoin and gold ratio. As always, we'll do some TA and charts at the end as we continue to hunt for some setups in real time. But the things I'm seeing going on and the things I'm going to present in today's episode, I think are extremely interesting. So let's get into this. Saylor is out here buying even more Bitcoin. Okay, they're just about to raise 42 billion in equity and 42 billion in fixed income to purchase a total of $84 billion worth of Bitcoin. Pretty wild. Doesn't look like they're going to slow down anytime soon. And if I hop onto the MicroStrategy chart, I wanted to spend a little bit of time going through this. Now, I usually reserve this for the level 3 members, but this current setup is so interesting to me, I wanted to talk about it. Way back here, as you can see, the camel indicator picked a daily and a weekly cycle low, and then we got this breakout. And so the level 3 members and I got into some trades here, and I was saying the entire time that this should be really easy to deal with because I think it's going to be very binary. I said that we should either get continuation of following this fractal, which would mean, of course, we just chop around in here and don't do much for a while. And particularly if this was to occur with Bitcoin making divergent higher highs, just like we saw in the prior cycle, and keep in mind this yellow fractal is from the prior cycle, it's copy and pasted from here. So back here, what we saw was MicroStrategy make lower highs, whilst Bitcoin at the same time went on to make higher highs. And I was suggesting that if we were to see the same thing again, then by the time we sort of get into this middle of the year neighborhood, it would be time to lock in down any gains we did have open on the table for MicroStrategy, walking away, and we could sort of pat ourselves on the back for saying that we bought close enough to the bottom to call it the bottom, we sold close enough to the top to call it the top, and then sure, we played a low probability bounce and we knew it was low probability and we still managed to walk away with something. So I was totally happy with that as kind of a worst case scenario for MicroStrategy. But I was also making the case that if I was wrong about that being the top, and if I was wrong about seeing a repeat of divergent lower highs and all of those irresponsibly long MicroStrategy guys were going to turn out to be correct, then what we would see is this thing rip almost immediately to new highs. It would do something like this. This was the yellow squiggle I was drawing. And I was saying, therefore, it should be pretty easy to deal with because I think it's either going to just rip straight up, in which case we can draw trend lines underneath and stay long, just like we did all the way through the entire bull run. Or what we would see is that kind of chopping around. And like I said, by the time we get to the middle of the year, if we hadn't made higher highs, it would be pretty easy to spot that and say, well, failed idea, take the money, run away, and we'll target the 4-year cycle lows in 2026 to get back in. But so far, for MicroStrategy, it looks an awful lot like that rip to new highs may well be on the table. Now, this was not my base case, but as you can see, we're positioned for it either way. The thing I think we all need to be keeping an eye on here is a higher high. If we can close daily candles above this wick from back here at about 402, then we have a change in market structure, a change in behavior, and thus the new base case becomes that we will see new all-time highs for MicroStrategy. So that's pretty interesting. It's also interesting to me that we picked this as the daily and the weekly cycle low early enough, whereas Bitcoin had some complexity in the price and it didn't want to pick at the same time. And on top of that, unless we're going to roll over sharply from here and end up back down in the kind of 280 region within the next week or so, then of course the only other path for this thing is to keep creeping up. And if it does, as I said, we're going to have a change in structure, change in behavior, and new all-time highs becomes the target. So super interesting. What else I think is even more interesting here is we had one of the biggest earnings misses ever for MicroStrategy, and the price doesn't care, which again goes to show that cycles are in control and everything else is narrative. Once the cycle has bottomed, the path of least resistance is higher, regardless of what the news or narrative out there might be. So super interesting times for the MicroStrategy crew. If you held all the way here and all the way down a 50% and you're still in, then there's an opportunity here to handle this current leg higher in a similar manner to how it was handled back here. So you may well just get away with it this time around if you're lucky. But again, make sure you manage that risk and make sure you nail down some gains. I'm probably not going to cover this again on the main channel. We'll probably move back to keeping this for the level 3 members going forward. But don't say I didn't warn you, right? You've got your two options here, the straight to new highs or the chop in the range. If we chop in the range, then you've got to deal with that. And of course, if we do blast off to new highs, manage the risk, actually take some profit, because especially for the 4-year cycle, we'll be extremely late. I showed this yesterday and was talking about how most of this capital, which is about $31 trillion worth of capital, is currently either limited or prohibited in its ability to acquire Bitcoin. But you can see at the top, Charles Schwab has unrestricted exposure access to Bitcoin. And since yesterday, we've now got new news to say that Charles Schwab, the $7.13 trillion asset manager, is going to launch a spot crypto trading desk within 12 months. So that is pretty good as well. One by one, we will start to see this capital flow into Bitcoin. And again, I am here to make the argument that it is still quite early. If you are here watching this video, you have the opportunity to get into Bitcoin before the rest of this $31 trillion makes it there. We got a little bit of alt-season hopium here. I bet you never thought you'd hear me say that. But take a look at this. I've been extremely vocal in saying no broad-based alt-season and Bitcoin would be the king and almost nothing would outperform Bitcoin this cycle. And for a long time, people got kind of annoyed about that. But remember, the alt-season, if it is going to occur, we don't know that it will, but if it is, it occurs right at the end of the cycle. And we just so happen to be getting later and later and later in those long-term cycles. If we go to the all-time price history, you can see that typically speaking, we spend between 37 and 35 bars. It's about 35 bars on average going up. That's 35 monthly candles. And as it stands right now, we are on month 30. So if this thing is going to do what it always does and right translate and top in month 35, which for this cycle would put us right around October of 2025, if some of that money is therefore going to rotate out into altcoins, we would expect to see any kind of alt season show up probably starting around July. So I think we're getting closer than ever. I do think it's also objectively true that the majority of people have been calling alt season the entire cycle, but it's just not how it works, right? If it's going to go, we would expect it to go kind of mid-year. And that also fits with what I've been saying with my weekly cycle low and double chart. I was saying that if we're going to see an alt season, if we're going to see rotation, if we're going to see ETH actually turn around, break trend, start to outperform, we would expect to see the price climb up like this, okay? And it's in here. When Bitcoin starts either consolidating or topping, that we would expect that rotation into ETH and then maybe altcoins thereafter. So I've been very open about mocking altcoiners for this entire cycle. I've been very open about trying to get people to stay away from altcoins until we get later in the cycle. But if you're going to be an altcoiner, okay, it's in this kind of neighborhood that I would think you have the best chance. Let me be really, really clear here, because I know there's a lot of newer eyes on the space. This is not me calling for a true alt season, nor is it me calling for a broad-based alt season. I'm simply saying the 20 odd that I expect to outperform Bitcoin will probably, if they're going to do so in this kind of neighborhood from July onwards. So let's see, right? Let's see. And you can tell if I'm right about this, because if Bitcoin squeezes up to new highs and then does something like this yellow squiggle suggests, and in here we finally get Ethereum, Solana breaking out and ripping to new highs, or at least ripping to the upside, then it's in here you can say, okay, Camel was right about that. And then you can start to really think about nailing down any gains you may or may not have. I found this chart from Big Mike on gold, and you can see here he has got an Elliott wave count that totally fits my expectations for the weekly cycle low. So that would be some kind of weekly cycle low, waste the entire weekly cycle consolidating, and then off we go. I've been talking about this a lot, and I think something like this is probably quite likely. When Elliott waves overlap cycle theory, it tends to be right and very powerful. So I'm thinking this makes a lot of sense, especially if there's an Elliott wave count that supports it. And at the same time, if gold is going to do something like that, whilst Bitcoin has just found its weekly cycle low, then that magical Bitcoin to gold ratio may well be in play here. Before I show you my chart, I wanted to shout out Trading Maverick here, because I really, really like this one. Just using a simple pitchfork, we can see that we could pretty easily be at the median line at about 8K around 2030. Now, anyone that's been following my work knows I think we're going to be smashing all the way through this and end up here by about 2033. But of course, first, we probably do have to spend a while consolidating here before then we can resume the bull trend. And of course, it's in here that Bitcoin has the chance to massively outperform. And that's what I want to talk about now with this old classic chart of mine, the BLX to gold ratio. Now, full disclosure, originally, I had this fractal somewhere like this, and you can see for many, many weeks, this thing looked really, really possible as Bitcoin was moving up to that all-time high pre-halving. If we were going to get the left translated cycle, I was speculating we would see something like this. I've also been very vocal about exiting the Bitcoin into gold here for me. I think that would be it would be too much of a delicious looking ratio not to take that, frankly. If I can get 100, maybe even 120 ounces of gold for one Bitcoin up here, knowing that we're probably going to reject at resistance and see Bitcoin massively underperform gold in the meantime, then for me, that's just a nicer option than holding all that cash in the bank or a trading account, right? But you can see since then, Bitcoin spent a long time kind of chopping around and not doing much, whilst gold went on an absolute tear, which made me come back here and re-examine this and say, well, clearly I was a bit premature here, but I do think now the setup is there to move this across. So, of course, in trading, being late and being wrong is the same thing. So I'm not trying to say I told you so or anything like that. This is me holding my hands up and saying I was wrong because I was early. But I also still think we've got a chance here at still making it to the top of this channel. If Bitcoin is going to rip out of that weekly cycle low and double a couple of times, maybe once, maybe twice, we don't know, where's my chart? Okay, if we go 150k pullback, 300k, and gold trades sideways in a range at 3k, that would give us our magical 100 ratio. But as we were also saying earlier, it's entirely possible we're going to have to waste an entire weekly cycle in here like this before we can go again, which of course would give Bitcoin the space to significantly outperform in this area, which I think potentially sets us up for a nice squeeze. Now, I've long been saying anything above about 65, 70, I think will be good enough for me. And I think I will have to rotate some Bitcoin into gold here, expecting this ratio to collapse back down towards here into the 2026 4-year cycle lows off the trend line. And then I think it will be time to either swap Bitcoin for gold or at least just hold the gold for the rest of the decade and re-enter the Bitcoin market down at that 4-year cycle low, expecting something like this to come thereafter. But I guess my point here is, if there was ever a time to see this thing come into play, I think it would be now. I think it would be now because we've got gold chopping around into that weekly cycle low, perhaps needing an entire 6-month weekly cycle to consolidate, whilst Bitcoin over the next 6 months, or even the next 5 months here, would potentially take us out to that October month 35 peak before the 12-month bear market decline, and we can point to this and say, okay, nothing was ever different the entire time. So as we wrap up this week, of course today is Friday, we'll be heading into the weekend, and then next week FOMC comes into focus. We know that we should be getting some buyable dips. This market is showing a surprising amount of strength, at least surprising to me. I wasn't expecting it to do this well before the pullback, so I think that sets us up for a nice rip to the upside here out of that FOMC time frame, but I do think there would be some dips to buy. The Nasdaq as well has probably got to backfill this gap, move down into that swing in FOMC, and then I think it can go. The Dow Jones even catching a breakout yesterday, so that's pretty nice. But again, I think a little bit more patience is required for the stocks. Gold, we've been doing to death on this channel, but you know my expectations, and until proven otherwise, then happy days there. As I've been saying with silver, I think we're going to get a trade set up in the not too distant future, which should be pretty close to bottoming in this daily cycle now. We're about day 19, so something around day 22 to 26 in there. Again, around that 6th to 7th of May timeframe should yield a tradable setup from yours truly. And Bitcoin continues to stage a lockout rally, doesn't it? So we love to see it. We are positioned for this via a couple of crypto-related equities, and I intend to get to full exposure by about that 7th of May timeframe, as I've been saying consistently. We're still holding the spots. We're still looking to dump the entire spot stack once we get up to what I believe will be about that month 35 high. And other than that, what else is there to say? Apart from have a great weekend. I'm your boy Camel. Until next time, take care. Cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel